Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and welcome to part 1 of our exploration of Asian horror films released in 2014. The more I think about it, the more I'm convinced that 2013 was an awesome year for Asian horror. There were a lot of interesting films to watch from that year, but could 2014 at least keep the momentum going and contribute another batch of films that are worth watching? Well, I think 2014 was successful in that regard. Now, Hong Kong released a film that retained the cultural aspects that were evident in the Tales from the Dark films that we covered from 2013. South Korea contributed a very unorthodox anthology that is lighter in its horrific tone, but is also one of the more interesting titles in recent years. Unfortunately, Thailand produced more crap than good in 2014, but the good titles are a nice addition to their portfolio. And as usual, Japan is tasked to act as the foundation of the entire Asian horror film industry, mostly because of the higher production trends from that country. And they came through with flying colors in 2014. Some of Japan's highlights include a bizarre, nasty, rape revenge movie from a notorious director of exploitation films, a continuation of a long-running franchise that breathed some new life into a genre cliché, an homage to samurai-era horror films that told a wildly popular legend in ways that I've never seen done before, a horrific descent into the violent conditions of war, a classy period piece that is beautifully spooky, a crazy sci-fi game of death, and a gritty horror thriller that is likely the best Asian horror film of this year. Now, we will be covering all of those movies in future parts of this video. Unfortunately, part 1 of these videos is always saved for the worst Asian horror films from the year in question. So put on your boots, because the crap is getting thicker. We've got to swim through the river of dumpster juice, venture through those nasty snake farms, and make our way down to the local clown college of bad horror movies. That's what we're in for tonight. None of what I said probably makes any sense to you, but trust me, we're in for the long haul this evening. So let's begin. Now, honorable mentions will be saved for part 2 of this video. And as always, titles for all the movies I discuss will be listed in the description box below. Okay, so the worst Asian horror film from 2014 is not an easy choice. It's not an easy one. We basically have a 3-way tie. I guess technically a 2-way tie with a disclaimer. And if you really want to think about it, we could have a 6-way tie, depending on your ability to consume elephant compost. Now, I simply cannot choose one movie from this year. There's not a clear-cut favorite, in my opinion. But the first handful of titles I'm covering tonight are excellent choices for this prestigious award. So the first film we're going to cover tonight is called The Apostles. This is a Chinese horror flick. Lu Yun, a novelist who has been suffering from memory loss and weird nightmares, plans to go to a strange town with a man named Han Bin, a real hothead who finds out that his wife was cheating on him, only to find out the truth of her husband, who has been killed in a plane crash with Han Bin's wife. Now, truths of infidelity surface, but that's only the tip of the iceberg here, because more nefarious and dangerous secrets will be revealed. Now, right from the opening scene, you just know this film is going to be a pile of crap. Right from the opening scene. Our very first scene is like a badly edited, badly directed attempt at surrealism. It uses lame fast-forward effects that feel very cheap. It doesn't set itself up or build to anything, and it feels kind of rushed. Which brings me to the direction of this film overall, which is pretty awful. I recently reviewed Satan's Slaves on my channel, and I said in that review that you could immediately tell that Joko Anwar knew what he was doing. Well, when you watch The Apostles, you can immediately tell that Joe Chen has absolutely no idea what he's doing. And this should be no surprise to us, because this is the same man who brought us Zombie 108, which I previously reviewed on this channel in this playlist. One of the most incompetently directed and edited Asian zombie movies of recent memory. The camera angles in The Apostles are so poorly chosen. One example is the incompetent car chase sequence, which is quite memorable in all the wrong ways. The viewer doesn't have enough time to take in any of the visuals or events because it's so hyperactive. The film is just too hyperactive, not in a good way. And that's a shame because there are some pretty cool visuals in the dream sequences. But they're hurt by some unimpressive effects that look kind of fake, stupid fast-forward photography, flash editing, and some lame jump scares, as well as the direction, which I've mentioned. The acting in this is also really bad at times. Anyone who follows this channel knows that I am a fan of Josie Ho. Who previously starred in the violent horror film Dream Home from 2010. She was really good in that movie. I always look forward to seeing her in movies, but she has some badly acted moments in The Apostles. She really does. The scene where she realizes that her husband was in an accident is pretty lame. Also, the way that she runs in this movie is painfully awkward. Just pay attention every time she runs. And usually she's running towards a camera for some reason. It's kind of hard to explain, but her running is just terrible in this movie. Man, I don't know. They should have done a few extra takes and gotten it right, I think. Script is also unfocused and fails miserably to naturally flow from scene to scene. I will say that this movie does become gleefully cheesy down the stretch. Some dude shows up in a Dracula kind of outfit, or an outfit that you would expect Dracula to be wearing, and the story takes a turn that the viewer certainly will not be expecting at one point, so I'll give it credit for that much, but the execution is just really bad. There's twists near the end of this movie, which I won't spoil, but the final sequence is it's just not good. You know what I mean? It's unearned, and it's actually unintentionally funny. During the final half hour, it's almost as if the film is close to contributing something interesting, but then proceeds to destroy what little potential it has. So, yeah, this is not good. It's pretty terrible stuff. The Apostles is difficult to find in terms of availability, and it's not exactly a bad thing. People should not be seeking this film out. So, yeah, that one's a great contender for the worst Asian horror film of this year. Now, our next film is from Japan, and it's not any better, and that is Blue Demon, also known as Ao Oni. Of course, from Japan, as I said. Now, this is based on the video game of the same name that features puzzle and RPG elements. Now, the story revolves around a young man who is trapped with his friends in a haunted building and is stalked by an evil monster. On the way to visit Shun, who didn't attend class, Hiroshi and Anna are drawn by a mysterious butterfly and enter the house. They get lost and wander around the place. Meanwhile, some other youths enter the house to test their courage. All these characters get trapped in the building and are stalked by a blue demon, hence the title of the film. Now, this movie is boring, it lacks atmosphere, and there are no good death scenes in this. This begins with a very short and lame horror sequence that very abruptly ends. Not a good way to start your film. The first actual death scene occurs near the 30-minute mark, so you have to wait about 30 minutes, and the scene really isn't shown. We only see some bloody remains of the victim. This style of death scene is used throughout this movie, because at no point do we actually see the monster kill someone on screen, like from start to finish. You know what I mean? From what I remember. It's been a little while since I've seen it, but I remember the lack of actual death scenes shown in the film was a big problem for me. There are a few times where we get close, but we never actually see a good kill. We do finally see the monster near the 40-minute mark, I think, or somewhere around there. And while the monster design is kind of interesting, the CGI effects really don't do it much justice. It looks very cartoonish. The lack of memorable horror is not compensated in the least with crafted tension or suspense. It's okay if you do the don't show the monster type thing, like the Jaws method, as people call it, where you don't actually see it, but you can sense it, and it's dangerous and kind of horrific and scary. That's a very valid method of doing a movie, but this movie doesn't do it. It just doesn't show the monster, and it's not good enough to give you any suspense leading up to its appearances. So, yeah. The characters are annoying, wafer thin, and badly acted. There's also a lot of dull filler in this movie to sit through, man. There were sections of this movie where I was kind of just twiddling my thumbs, just waiting for something to happen. And the film is also very visually unappealing as well. If you're going to have a crazy, otherworldly monster stalking you, at least throw in some more, vibrant lighting or some good cinematography or something like that. This movie doesn't even have that. It doesn't even have the aesthetics to help you get through it. The one thing I did kind of like about Blue Demon was the corridor chase sequences at times, since it kind of shows the monster chasing the camera from the viewer's perspective. So it's almost like the monster's chasing you, which I thought that was kind of effective at times. It was a few brief, decent moments in this movie, I guess. The runtime is only 70 minutes long, but it feels quite a bit longer, in my opinion. Painfully incompetent stuff. Yeah, I really did not like this one. Now, Blue Demon is available on Region 2 DVD without subtitles. I'm not sure if I got a subtitled release or not. Alright, now last year, you may remember this if you follow my DVD collection playlist. I did a DVD collection addendum video that covered the horror movies that I purchased while vacationing in Japan last spring. A few of those were pretty good. We'll get to those in the later videos in this playlist. But most of them were pretty crappy. They were garbage. And it's time to talk about one of those blind buys, and that is Kyo Akurei Jyusan Bono Norowareta Toko Eizo. That's a mouthful for you. A Japanese horror anthology, again, 2014. Now, this is an omnibus of 13 documentary-style horror films with a total runtime of 58 minutes. You know the deal with these kinds of movies by now, right? We get a narrated introduction with a creepy voice dude as images of pictures are shown to us, with blurred out faces to protect the identities of the individuals involved in these allegedly horrific events. And things go on from there. Typical documentary-style stuff. There are a bunch of interesting documentary-style horror films from Japan in recent years, which I've covered on this playlist. This is not one of them. Now, the background images in this film look really fake. They're embarrassing, they're so fake. Especially like some of the ones early on. They really put no effort into making these ghostly beings look remotely convincing. You know what it kind of looks like? It reminded me, if you've ever seen a YouTube video where the YouTuber kind of inserts a video of themselves, like dancing or walking, within another video, and like the YouTuber's video is such a low quality that it really clashes with the actual video that they're kind of putting themselves in, so to speak. That's what this reminded me of. Like, it was that bad. The other thing it kind of reminded me of was, remember that Bruce Lee cardboard cutout scene in Game of Death, where they planted Bruce Lee's face, like, it looked like a cardboard cutout in the scene? Reminded me of that as well. It's unacceptable garbage. This is bad. So, yeah, this is just, they put no effort into it. The other thing that really irritated me with this is that every single segment is the same thing. Okay, you have a short segment, and there's like 13 of them or whatever, right? But every single segment has 4 minutes of completely boring filler, and then a cheesy, stupid, ghostly image at the end. Like, there's no build-up to the scares. There's nothing interesting happening. One of the stories, as an example, shows a guy slowly digging a hole in the ground for 4 minutes. And then the scene ends with a really fake-looking, ghostly face in the dirt that's half covered. You can tell he just put, like, a really cheesy special effect and just plopped it on the thing. This is horrible. There's no reason to spend any more time on this because it's so obscure, no one will ever bother to watch it. Availability of this, I guess it's available on Region 2 DVD, Japanese, without subtitles. Just don't even bother trying to find it. I don't even know if it's available online or not for purchase. So those three films are all good choices for the worst Asian horror film of 2014. But the last one, I don't know if you can really count it. You know what I'm saying? Because of its obscurity and the fact that there are probably a bunch more of these direct-to-video flicks that are just as bad. I tend to pick the ones that are good, I think, because either Koji Shiraishi directs it, or they're part of a franchise that I like Torihara or Yami Douga. But you got to be careful. It's a good warning for you. Don't blind buy Japanese documentary-style horror films, especially if they don't have subtitles and they're kind of expensive. Luckily, this one I got for like $5 or something when I was over there at Book Off. But just be careful. Maybe try some of the ones I recommend you, or if you find a director you really like, that's the way to do it. So, The Apostles and Blue Demon are probably the two legitimate worst films from this year. But the next handful of films are not much better. So if you've seen any of the next handful of films that I'm covering, and you think it's the worst film of this year for Asian horror, it's a good choice. It's a valid choice. The next one, we go to South Korea. The Tunnel. All right. Now, a word of warning. Do not confuse this film with the one starring Jung Woo-ha that was released in 2016. This one is different. Ki-chul drives his friends out to a resort that is owned by his father and is situated by an abandoned coal mine. When they get there, they cross paths with a spooky man who warns them about the mine. Later, the friends find themselves in a desperate situation and enter the abandoned tunnels. But will they ever see the light of day again? Well, the opening scene. There's a lot of similar adjectives and descriptive phrases you're going to hear tonight. The opening scene is going to be one phrase you're going to hear a lot tonight because a lot of these bad movies, you could tell from the opening scene is going to be bad. And this movie's no different. Opening scene of this one involves two men who are trapped in a mine and something bad happens to them. Totally incompetent sequence in terms of direction, editing, gets the film off to a bad start. And after this weak opening sequence, one may wonder if this film just gets better, but it doesn't. It uses obnoxious scare tactics, like jump scares and some really bad CGI. The jump scares in this film really irritated me because they were very lazy and very predictable. 10 minutes into the film, here's an example. Some dude, you'll know where I'm going with this, scares his friend by sneaking up behind him and smacking his hand on his shoulder, which is, of course, supplemented by a loud boom score soundtrack noise, right? I mean, how many can we just... Everyone in the world needs to move past these types of moments in horror films at this point, right? So yeah, that's the type of stuff you get in this movie. Almost every single scare in this movie is accompanied by a loud boom that is intended to shred your eardrums and make you jump in your seat. It's just utter nonsense. It requires no effort for people to do this. I could go to a supermarket, walk up to a random person behind them, smack them on the shoulder and scream in their ear, and they're gonna be a little startled by it because it's just so easy to do. You know what I mean? It's just obnoxious. It's not scary, is my point. Plot and characters range from boring to annoyingly stupid. So, for example, the guy who warns the kids about the mine is super creepy to the point of being cartoonish. I actually laughed when he showed up. He's got like a weird eye and he's all gruff. He's scruffled and everything. It was just like, come on, man. You know what I mean? The protagonists are also annoying in this. Not good. There's also a lot of dull filler. Dull filler, a term you're going to hear a lot tonight. A lot of boring filler in this one. People, their protagonist just kind of putz around. They go swimming. They eat some food. The backstory regarding the tunnel is dull and lacking in dramatic impact. Doesn't really work well. One shallow positive that I had with this one for heterosexual males is that there are some pretty good-looking women in this movie. I will give it that much, but it doesn't matter in a film that's this useless. So yeah, the tunnel, just, man, stay away. The one with Jung Woo-ha, it's like a thriller set in a tunnel that collapses. It's all right. It's watchable. But this one is just awful. So the tunnel is out of print. The Korean DVD is out of print. It is on some streaming sites, legitimate streaming sites like Cineflix. All right. Now it's Thailand's turn. We're kind of country hopping, right? It's Thailand's turn to contribute a crap film. And Thailand's got a few in this video tonight. This next one was kind of a disappointment for me. But it's called OT, Ghost Overtime, and this is a horror comedy. This is an extended feature-length adaptation of the short film in the anthology 3 AM. I reviewed that anthology in my Asian horror video from 2012, and I found it to be generally underwhelming. But can this extended feature improve on the flaws of its predecessor? We saw that when the Mo brothers did Macabre, because Macabre, the Indonesian film, I think from 2009, was an extended version of their short film in an anthology that was released a few years prior. So can this film do that? No, it can't. It's essentially about a group of people who like to scare the crap out of other people. Similar in some ways to the Scare Tactics show that used to air on the Sci-Fi Channel in the US, a show that I found kind of entertaining in some aspects. Now, our protagonists agree to a scare job in this movie that is related to a high-class wedding that is taking place in a haunted hotel, but things get complicated. So Ananda Everingham is one of the lead actors in this movie. You'll know this guy. He previously starred in Shudder and Memory, both of which were very good Thai horror films. It's always nice to see him. That's a positive. I always like seeing this guy in movies. He's good. Unfortunately, this is a movie that lives and dies with its humor. This movie really, really pushes the funny button, or tries to push your funny button a lot. And it lives or dies with its humor, because that's really in the forefront of this movie. And for me, the humor did not work at all. It's low-grade, silly nonsense with lots of hysterical behavior and obnoxious screaming. There's really not many legitimately funny moments in the entire film. Maybe like one or two, maybe. And that's a big problem here because it tries so hard to be funny. And because of that, there's some big-time overacting in this as well, especially from the side characters. There's a dude with glasses, I forgot his name, who is unbearable every second he's on screen. Now, due to its premise, there is a potentially interesting element regarding whether or not a scare in the film is the work of a ghost or the human characters who are trying to scare other human characters. So that's a key component of the film, and it could be pretty entertaining if you make that like the entire premise of the film. In a regular horror film that's being serious, when a human character scares another human character, it's just stupid. But in this case, you're revolving around that, and it's a horror comedy. So there's promise to this, but the script writing related to this is extremely lazy and lacking in detail, which results in some unconvincing twists. You know what I mean? It's not good. The scares themselves, when it tries to be scary, are mediocre at best. This film really does try to get dramatic as well during short stretches of time, and it fails quite miserably in that regard. It's hard to care about anything that happens in this movie. So yeah, this one's pretty bad. OT, Ghost Overtime, is moderately available on Region 3 DVD with subtitles if you really want to check it out. Alright, shifting back to Korea with one that's pretty obscure, and it's probably good that it is. And that is Zombie School. Now, Jyusan School is for troubled kids, delinquents and whatnot. So one day, a strange and bleak mood surrounds the school because the teachers were bitten by an undead pig and turned into zombies. So the kids need to collaborate with one another and stay alive by battling the educators. Fortunately for the viewer, most of the teachers are very unlikable before they turn into the undead, so you do want them to die. But the problem is that the protagonists are also pretty unlikable. So this begins with about, I'm not joking, no exaggeration, 50 minutes of boring filler material, with all of the characters being portrayed as shallow and annoying. Tons of boring dialogue to sit through in this. No sense of building dread for the upcoming threat. For example, there's a scene where the faculty bury a dead pig, which is fine to show, but it takes forever for the scene to it's like so drawn out unnecessarily. Then it tries to establish conflict between the teachers and the students for dramatic effect, I guess, but it's all very shallow and unengaging. Nothing interesting really happens in this. Just a lot of really boring conversations and scenes with people sitting around doing nothing. You know what I mean? Just padded runtime. And the film is only 87 minutes long, but it feels a lot longer than it actually is. In terms of horror type stuff, there's no atmosphere in this. Filmmakers don't even try to establish it. The zombie attacks are poorly filmed. You know what I mean? Kind of like, what was that movie I just covered here? The poorly filmed and The Apostles, right? Just really badly filmed stuff here. There's nothing interesting in how the violence is constructed. Lots of shaky cam, zoom-ins, bad editing. Direction is just atrocious in this film. It's unacceptable, the way this film is shot and edited. There are moments where the camera cuts away at the point of the zombie attack and shows nothing. Like it's a zombie film. You usually need gore in a zombie film. Not always, but you usually do. This film doesn't really give us that. Final death scene is just really bad. It's not a good way to end your movie. If forced to name a positive, the zombie makeup I thought was pretty good. And the zombie faces actually looked pretty good, like they put some effort into the makeup in this movie, so that's good. And there's like 1 or 2 decapitations. That's about it in terms of positives. Skip it, people. Skip it. Zombie School is available on DVD in the United States. Although I have heard complaints that the DVDs are kind of not the best quality. You know what I mean? I don't know what's wrong with them, but I think they're legitimate DVDs in the US, but just don't bother. Don't bother. All right, next one. My House from Thailand. Yes, we go back to Thailand. It's also known as The Cursed House. Wow, what a creative title for a film. A woman moves into a new house with her husband, daughter, and mother, but their lives take an unexpected turn when strange things start to happen. Really original premise as well, as you can see. In any case, their food rots at an abnormal pace, so they know something is wrong. And as you might expect, this isn't exactly the most original horror film out there, but can it make up for it with its execution? No, it can't. Now, first and foremost, there is way too much dull filler in this movie as well. It's dull filler year, in part 1 of Asian horror movies. Most Thai horror films, even the bad ones, usually have sufficient amounts of horror content. Even if it's bad, there's going to be a scare around every corner, right? This one does not. That's surprising for a Thai horror film. Instead, we get lots of monotonous conversations between the characters, a lot of which are in broad daylight, no less. You don't even get the atmosphere. This is blandly shot and boring to watch. What little horror exists in this movie is kind of limp and very conventional. We get cheesy scenes involving ghosts and little kids, a bathtub scene, as well as a completely forgettable exorcist scene. Actually, I remember the protagonist simply staring at the exorcist while he's being hanged and choked to death by the spirits. They're just kind of sitting there watching him, I'm like, dude, at least help a dude out. It's just not good, man. There's a scene where the mother gets knocked unconscious by a gust of wind. I'm not joking, man. The acting is subpar in this. There's also a bit of lame humor to sit through, not a lot. The film begins with a poorly acted opening scene where the father gets angry at his son, but it turns out to be a dream sequence within another dream sequence. The script is, as you can tell, pretty bad as well. Overall, the film just feels incompetent. You know what I mean? It's just incompetent. There are some nicely violent moments down the stretch that I liked, but too little, too late, man. Sound design is pretty lame. Uses extremely generic boom sounds and other such tactics. So, bad horror movies a lot of times have similar flaws. You're seeing it here. Don't watch it. My House is on YouTube without subtitles. Let's stay in Thailand for our next one. Next one is called She-Devil. This is a genre bender, horror romance comedy. A naive country guy has a crush on a beautiful girl in his village. Her name is Ploy. Now, when he and Ploy's parents arrange the couple's marriage, he is delighted. However, on the night of their wedding, Ploy suddenly changes into a different and decidedly scary person. But rather than run away, our protagonist decides to do everything he can to bring the real Ploy back. Well, after the abrupt and seemingly abbreviated opening scene, we are treated to some terribly unfunny comedy within the opening 10 minutes. It really gets this film off to a bad start, like a lot of the movies we're covering tonight. These movies don't even take their time to get bad. They're just bad from minute 1. The music also sounds like something you'd hear out of a screwball comedy. They do use some goofy, it's screwball comedy music. It's the only way I can describe it. It really takes you out of the film. This is a good example of tonal shifts not working in a film. And I'm a big fan of tonal shifts in films. To mix it up, this one does it very incompetently. The film reintroduces some of these dumb, humorous moments throughout the film, so it's not good. Then we get our first attempt at a scare. It's a cheap jump scare that's extremely predictable and not the least bit creative. Not much of a surprise. Lots of loud booms in this film as well. No effort spent on crafting good scares. Almost every single time the scare consists of a ghost standing still with a loud boom noise. The character will turn one way, and they'll turn it, and then the ghost is there, and it goes boom, It's just totally ineffective. Characters are not as endearing as they should be, given the genre-bending nature of the film. The girl in this film is so quiet that she comes off as just having no personality or chemistry with the male lead, which is kind of important in a genre bender that's kind of a romantic comedy along the way. And our lead himself is just too whiny and annoying to earn the viewer's sympathy or interest. There's no energy or bite to this movie. It's so unacceptably bland. It takes forever to get going. Tons of dull filler in this, I'm telling you. Practically no storyline progression at all for most of its runtime. It's basically people sitting around having boring conversations. Snooze fest. Don't watch it. Alright, so She-Devil is available on DVD without subtitles, although some legitimate streaming sites have it, like Cineflix. Alright, our next film tonight. Our final 5 films. Okay, do we have 5 left or do we have more than 5 left? We've got 5 left. Okay, our final 5 films tonight are less painful. Okay, they're less painful from what we've covered so far. But that does not mean that they're actually good, in my opinion. So, again, if you've seen any of the films that I've already covered, and in your opinion any of them are the worst Asian horror films of the year, it's a legitimate choice. I don't know what to tell you. Alright. Let's go to Hong Kong next, and that is Twilight Online. Why is Twin Mun the focus of dark energy on the 19th day of the 7th lunar month? Well, we've invited Master Ing to explain in this movie. This is based on 2 real-life incidents. The 2003, I'm butchering this name, Tuen Mun Road traffic accident that claimed 21 lives. A bus apparently drove over the side of a bridge. And the 2013 Ao Oni estate suicide, where a woman dressed in red leapt to her death on the day of the Chinese Ghost Festival. And that spot became a popular site for suicide jumps. So, this first area is claimed to be the most cursed of all 18 districts. The film begins with a team of investigators who delve into the suicide case specifically. So, yeah, despite my awful pronunciation, it almost doesn't matter. The opening of this film is a little bit cheesy. It starts off a bit cheesy. The investigator, looks at the camera and says, "Stop shaking. You're coming with me to investigate." You know what I mean? But overall, it starts off okay. It's kind of charmingly cheesy. It does not waste any time getting into the thick of things. Acting is a mixed bag. No one is great or anything, but it's, there's some decent performances here. Dialogue, run-of-the-mill. Story is bland, and it's hard to care about the mystery element specifically. Direction is pretty good, though. The direction in this is pretty good, especially the camera angles. I like the camera angles in this film. I like the way the film looks as well. A few of the horror sequences had potential here, but come off as kind of amateurish in their editing and execution. There's a scene with a girl on a bus who's being stalked by a ghost, but it uses a lame little twist that feels kind of like a cop-out at the end of the scene. Kind of ruins the scene that could have been pretty good up to that point. There are a few scenes in a forest which feature a girl who trips over a tree root, as well as a poor-looking CGI ghost. Those scenes in the forest are probably the worst scenes in the film. They're not good. There is a reliance here on some jump scares, which is not my thing, as you can tell. And I've said many times before. Overall, the scares, they're really not that good. They're not good enough to elevate this film to be watchable. You know what I mean? Now, Twilight Online, in my opinion, is not offensively bad. It's simply run-of-the-mill and mediocre from start to finish. Twilight Online is available on Region 3 DVD with subtitles. Next one was a huge disappointment, man. This is one of the more disappointing Asian horror films from recent years for me. I gotta go with The Eye's Diary, a Thai horror romance. So after losing his girlfriend to an automobile accident, a man becomes an emergency crew volunteer to steal personal belongings of the dead in an effort to attract spirits for the purpose of reuniting with his girlfriend's spirit. The guy's job is to retrieve dead bodies from car accidents, suicides, murders, or other unfortunate events. His buddies warn him to not steal from dead bodies, but he doesn't care, because his goal is to find the spirit of his dead lover. And he believes that collecting the possessions of dead people will eventually allow him to see her. Now, there are a small handful of human protagonists in this film, but a few of them rub me the wrong way. There's a chubby comic relief guy who is terrible. And, oh man, he's so irritating. He acts like a 5-year-old child the whole time. It's awful, man. Should have written him completely out of this film. And the bits of humor are also not very good. There's a honking boob scene in this. There's a honking boobs scene where somebody or something walks up, grabs a girl by her boobs, and you hear like a honking horn. I'm like, come on, man. And it's in the middle of like a scary moment or a supposedly serious moment. So, yeah. I did not like the humor in this. The dead girlfriend is a protagonist ghost in this who can suffer pain from the antagonist ghost, which is kind of an interesting concept here. Never fully explored, though, in this. Our protagonist also has difficulties even believing in ghosts to begin with, which is a prerequisite to actually seeing them, at least, by this film's rules. So there are some interesting little angles in this movie, I think, but they're not really expanded on as much as I would have hoped. Now, in regard to the horror, the movie's unfocused and lacking in proper build-up to the scares. None of the horror sequences are memorable in this. Some of them are also pretty stupid. There's a scene involving that aforementioned chubby comic relief guy and a little baby doll that he's walking around with that is so unacceptable. It's unacceptable and a complete waste of time. The filmmakers should be ashamed of themselves for having a scene like that in the final cut of a movie. It's so bad. During a few scenes, the ghosts are actually scared away by flashlights too, which is kind of weak. You know what I mean? It's just weak. The romance element I thought was pretty good. Not a big problem, actually, which is rather surprising because you would assume that the romance element would be the hardest thing to execute in a horror romance film, but it was actually pretty good in this. Practically speaking, this film is just hard to sit through. I find it hard to sit through in one sitting. Really. You get fidgety. You know what I mean? The horror scenes aren't strong enough to make an impression and give you a dose of adrenaline. And the dialogue and characters aren't good enough to take you through the slower parts. Again, bitter disappointment, and the reason for that. You're probably wondering why it's such a bitter disappointment. This is the same director who gave us 13 Game of Death. That very, entertaining, fun thrill ride. You know what I mean? He ended up directing this dud. So I was expecting this to be pretty good, and this gets good reviews online. Check the reviews online for The Eye's Diary. There are a number of pretty strong, positive reviews of this film. So coupled with the director and the strong word of mouth, I was expecting this to be good, and I was severely disappointed in it. Did not like it. But because it gets positive reviews, and given the director, this is one of the ones that I don't recommend, but I couldn't blame you if you want to check it out. And The Eye's Diary is available on Region 3 DVD with subtitles. I think it's also on Cineflix, along with Twilight Online and Red Devil or She Devil and some of the other ones too. All right, 3 left. It's kind of a long video. I'm knocking off all the crap in one video. Let's do this. The next one, again, not too terrible, but I didn't like it. The Second Coming from Hong Kong. Ming and his wife, Jen, lived a quiet, ordinary life with their 13-year-old daughter while their 20-year-old son is at medical school overseas. Everything seems just perfect until Ming accidentally knocks his daughter down with his car on the cusp of her 14th birthday. From then onwards, her behavior turns bizarre. His son returns from school to find Ming more and more distant towards his sister, and as the family struggles to decipher the cause of it all, the daughter's increasingly disturbing behavior escalates into violence. Dark and hidden secrets are unveiled one by one, and the family is forced to confront their past. Now, to this film's credit, it does begin with a rather uncomfortable self-mutilation scene that I thought was pretty effective. There's a decently macabre refrigerator scene and a fake-out dream sequence later on, which I thought were pretty good. After a while, though, the scares do get a bit repetitive and monotonous in their style. There is a surprisingly graphic amputation scene at one point as well that seemingly comes from out of nowhere, but I thought it did not work. It just, I don't know, it was too abrupt and unearned in my opinion. The ending has some unnecessarily confusing twists, in my opinion. Maybe I missed something, but I was kind of scratching my head at times near the end of this movie. This is really basic stuff in terms of like story and execution. Acting and direction are decent enough. They're decent. Never becomes bad enough to be like unwatchable or anything, right? But it failed to grab me, excite me, or simply entertain me enough, to recommend it to other people. I will say that this movie did improve slightly after a second viewing. I just wanted to make sure, because I gave it a mediocre rating, not a terrible rating, so I had to make sure it wasn't, one of those films that grows on you a lot after a second viewing, but it really, just a little bit better after a second viewing. It is decent enough that I could understand why some people might like it, but I did not. Second Coming. Difficult to find. It's on some legitimate streaming sites like Cineflix. Final two here. We go back to Japan for our next film, which is part of a long-running franchise that is usually pretty reliable, in my opinion, and that is Yami Douga 11, also known as Tokyo Videos of Horror 11. It's a Japanese horror anthology, and I've covered all of these movies, or a bunch of them up to this point. And I've enjoyed just about all of them to a greater or lesser extent. This one didn't cut it, though. This is an anthology of 5 short films with a total runtime of 61 minutes. You should know the drill by now regarding this franchise. Let's go through a few of the very quickly go through some of the plots of these 5 short films. We have One-Way Relationship. A man receives a phone call from his friend. His friend wants him to record his daily activities for some reason, but he wouldn't say why. They go, his friend goes on a lunch date with a girl, and this guy's recording it. And later on, she receives a call from his friend after they kind of part ways, and something weird happens. Now, this contributes one of the more grotesque images in this entire franchise, and it also has an interesting revelation at one point. I liked it, and it got this anthology off to a strong, good start, in my opinion. The second short film, Street Performance. Something is caught on camera during a street performance. Pretty simple. I did not notice the creepy image in this short film at first, but in this case, it's kind of a good thing. Decent stuff. Third short film is Insinuation. A man receives a video from his prior employer, which is related to one of his former clients who owed this company a lot of money. So something happened to one of his former clients. The woman recorded secret videos of herself and asked that they be delivered to this guy's address. So the problem with this one is it's a mostly boring segment. Not a whole lot happens, and the money shot is not worth the wait. The fourth short story, An Old House. Someone is captured on video in an old farmhouse. Mediocre stuff, not worth watching. And finally, Details About Voyeurs, about a man who pays for an escort and secretly records their happy time in a bedroom. Another pretty boring story with a weak finale. Just kind of waiting for this one to end. So, yeah, overall, there's just no tension established in stories 3 and 5 specifically. A lot of just boring filler material. That's a big problem because they're 2 of the longest segments. Remember, in these anthologies, you'll have some long segments and some really short ones, and some of the worst segments were the longer ones. So I cannot recommend Yami Douga 11. It's one of the weakest installments of this franchise, which is ironic because I think Yami Douga 12 is one of the best. These films are available. They're called the Tokyo Videos of Horror on Amazon. I think they're available on Amazon with subtitles, streaming. All right, we're almost done. We're almost done, people, with the crap. The last one, maybe not crap per se, it's just kind of mediocre. And that is The Haunted Cinema from 2014. This one is from China. An actress is killed on the set of a horror movie, and her ghost begins to haunt the director, a former lover, and her colleagues. In order to get rid of the curse, they organize a midnight movie showing in honor of her memory, not knowing what awaits them in the cinema trap. Now, after the opening scene in the cinema, there is some setup time that is devoted to the movie director who is being haunted. The main plot does not really kick into gear until near the 30-minute mark, and the cinema locale is not used to its full effect. Now, Onryo ghost imagery is used in this. They borrow the onryo from Japan, which is a cliche that did not seem like it was necessary given the story in this. Scare tactics are mostly run-of-the-mill and unintentionally satirical at times. I mean, how many times can you see a ghost like slide past behind a character with a loud noise? The twists had potential. There are some twists in this that I kind of liked, but they bite off way more than they can chew in this, and are consequently ineffective. The first twist during the second half is kind of lame. The second twist is actually kind of interesting and cool, and then the third twist just kind of ruins everything. So they just went too far. They painted themselves in a corner with this, right? Final half hour does have some interesting stuff to it, I think, but it's kind of jumbled and messy. I do like some of the sound design and music in this film. Performances range from decent to below average, I would say. But ultimately, this is a forgettable film. I actually saw this film a few years ago and completely forgot that I saw it. That's never good, right? I watched it again recently, and I was adding it to my personal records, and then I realized, oh, I saw this movie before. I totally forgot I saw it. So that in and of itself probably tells you not to watch it. You know, don't seek it out because it's that forgettable. You know, if you want a film that revolves around a cinema, go watch Midnight Ballad for Ghost Theater from 2006, which is phenomenal. Or Coming Soon from 2008 instead. All right. And, the availability of this one. Haunted Cinema is available on Region 3 DVD without subtitles, but it is available on certain legitimate streaming sites like Cineflix. Alright, so that concludes part 1 of our journey through Asian horror films released in 2014. Pretty painful stuff. But of course, you're talking, how many films did we cover tonight? About 13 or so. And I will be covering almost 40 films from this year. So, part 2, of course, of this video, which I will upload when I get back from my vacation to Japan. Might be in December. Part 2 might show up. Maybe November if we're lucky. That'll be, that'll cover the watchable films from this year. Part 3 will cover some of the good stuff. And then part 4 will be my favorites. So that's what you have to look forward to. So be sure to join me for part 2 when it hits. Those films will be a bit more watchable. And as always, I will see you next time.